how do we address this thing called the stigma attached with burnout, that you're not any less?
The stigma is just like the first step. You don't have to stay burned out or overwhelmed any one day longer.
You are not pausing enough to enjoy life. You are just running.
And it takes tremendous courage to kind of really assess where you are and saying, okay, I'm not okay right now. There is shame associated with that a lot of times.
When do you work for yourself? What do you do for your own self?
There's so much runway to change that. It is not the end. It's almost like the beginning and a pivot to what could be different.
Hi, everyone. From Round Glass, this is Living with Sunny. I'm your host, Sunny Singh. Today, our guest is a leadership coach and author. Her name is Rachel O'Mara. We're going to talk about burnout. We all experience or might have experienced burnout. Welcome, Rachel. So good to have you.
Hi, Sunny. Thank you for having me. It's so good to be here.
Now, Rachel, for you, burnout is very personal. You experienced it, and that led to a different path, different journey for your life.
Yeah. So my version of burnout was I looked great on paper. In fact, I was working at Google. I'd been there a couple of years. I'd had an MBA. I lived in New York City. I was in San Francisco. I'd owned my own place, all these great things. Yet I felt like a failure. I really wasn't doing that well on the inside. Whatever I was doing, it felt like either it wasn't enough or I was very stuck in the mode of not being present. And what I mean by that is, I'm sure you can appreciate this, is that I was either always thinking about the future, like what did I need to do next? What was next on my to-do list? What are the 5 things my manager's waiting for, and so on? Or I was stuck in the past, meaning I was stuck in my shoulda, coulda, wouldas and blaming myself for not getting the project done yet, or not responding, or why didn't I say this in the meeting? And so all of those things added up to not knowing in the moment how I was feeling, expressing that, knowing what I needed, and it ultimately led me to feel just like nothing was working. And I ended up taking an unpaid break. And I did go back to Google, but that's what the book Pause is all about, is essentially my version of burnout and all the tools that I've learned since that are really rooted in emotional intelligence and neuroscience and things that I now know.
The experience you had, so many people have the same experience. I've had similar experiences. And not only that, I keep having it. It's like a Groundhog Day, right? It's like it keeps recurring because, when you're an A-type, and I'm pretty sure you're an A-type, and you always do what you love, and you get soaked into it, you get consumed by it because you're just enjoying it so much. And before you know it, you're off the deep end and saying, I'm spending so much time, and then all kinds of questions are coming, pressures are building up depending on the role you're playing. So this is something that all of us experience, and I also struggle with it. And sometimes I say I have the solution. Sometimes I say, hey, Sunny, let's take a couple of days off. And I will talk about that too. But this is a commonplace problem, Rachel.
Absolutely. And I know you and I are not alone. I relate. And I know that our statistics are now through the roof with burnout. In fact, since the pandemic, the statistic I know is 86% of us are not satisfied in our roles, and we're burning out at the C-level, who are saying, like C-level all the way down to the individual contributors and wage workers, that it's not working. The system that we have right now in our world, where we're always on, is challenging because we don't feel equipped to do what we need to do, or to set boundaries that work for us, or have the conversation with a manager or a coworker. And I'm with you, Sunny. I know for me, I also feel like I'm on that verge even now, like 10 years later, and I wrote a book on it. Like, I help people pause because there's this, I think in our culture, and at least in the Western world, there's this always on mentality that if I don't get back to someone right away, or if I don't go all in and, burn my candle at both ends, then I'm leaving something on the table. And I think that that's not accurate. I think that that's our own projection of what others might be expecting of us. But the reality is we have to take care of ourselves, because we won't sustain ourselves unless we feel satisfied and that we're not burning out.
It's just not a question of if you have and reporting to a leader, but even when you are a leader and you have a team that you're leading, right? I find that myself, when I'm really burning out because I'm just working very hard, long hours, day after day, I just get more irritated. I start getting more demanding of my team. I put more pressure on them, and a lot of time just unreasonably so, because I'm feeling the pressure. It just trickles down. If having a bad day just because I can't handle my day because of burnout, it trickles down, and that's not fair to anybody, whether you are part of a team or you are running and leading a team.
It's not fair, and that's the thing. And like what we don't know, when I didn't know either, is that when we feel stressed, so it's stressful already, right? We have our obligations and responsibilities, but then we have added pressure maybe from a deadline that's due, that's approaching. So we feel like we're constricted. And from the neuroscience side, if I can share with you, it's actually what happens in our brain is that we feel like we can't even see the good things anymore. So let's say you saw your manager that's smiling at you down the hallway. Your brain, because of the stress, would interpret it as a scowl. And that's what happens. That's what happens when we feel stressed. So it's actually this looped cycle of feeling the stress, our brains interpreting the fear of that, going into tunnel vision, and then not having that ability to kind of go back out and say, like, hold on a second, how am I doing right now? This isn't that helpful. And that's where we get stuck.
And it's like a lose-lose proposition. And Rachel, now if you really look at, as we go towards, okay, we know we experience burnout. We have experienced this. This is a problem that we have. As human beings, or as people, just you enter the workforce, you get more in the rat race, as I call it. You want to fill up every minute of your time. It's like, I got a minute, I got 5 minutes, I got an hour. What can I do versus what can I not do? So I want to move the gears towards the thing that you focus quite a bit on. You've written a book on it called Pause. Pause can mean different things. Let's talk to our users about our audience about what do you mean by pause and pausing.
Yeah, I call a pause any intentional shift in behavior, which is a different definition than I think a lot of us think of. When you think of the word pause, and for all of us listening, what do you think of? Like, what comes to mind? I'm curious, Sunny, what you think of.
So when I think of pause, and I'm a bit biased because I live well-being, but for me, pause is, hey, just stop. Like, let's say you're getting irritated, Sunny, just pause and focus on your breathing. That's one kind. And when in the moment, Rachel, you don't think of let's start breathing, right? It's just you are just getting irritated or you're frustrated with yourself or whatever. So one idea of pause is, Sunny, just breathe. The other is, Sunny, what are you doing? How are you living? This is not the way to talk, behave, think, live. This is not fair. It's not fair to you. I mean, you are, irrespective of what happens, you're just messing up your own health. Or saying, hey, you know what, Sunny, all the important things you want to do in life, you want to talk to your daughter, your kids, your friends, you want to take a me time. You are not pausing enough to enjoy life. You are just running. So for me, pause is all of those reflections and avatars.
Yeah. And that to me totally qualifies as a pause, right? An intentional shift in behavior. So you stopping and telling yourself to stop, or you questioning, or anyone, that to me is a pause. And what I think is so interesting is I think of it like this umbrella term that when traditional terms, it's passive, right? It's kind of like don't do anything or stop. And what I'm suggesting and inviting people to think about is that it's not passive, but it's active. And it's not about potentially doing one thing across the board. It's what works for you. But I think if we're high achievers, like you said, type A's, we're all doing incredible things. We have to make it intentional or it doesn't happen. And that's the thing I want to share is that the rate that we're going, right, our 24/7 culture and the work world, and the world won't slow down. Like, it's not going to get any slower. And I'm all for productivity. And that's what I call the pause paradox, by the way. That's thinking that pausing is me being a slacker or the judgment that I place on it. But it's actually an invitation to be actively engaged in whatever it is that's intentionally shifting you. It might be stopping. It might be taking a breath.
how do we address this thing called the stigma attached with burnout that you're not any less? You are more because you are addressing it.
Yeah, that's so important. I am a big believer that it takes tremendous courage to kind of really assess where you are and look at yourself and saying, okay, I'm not okay right now. I need something to change. And maybe you don't even know what it is, but something isn't working. And that's why I am burned out or feeling this failure type of thing. So knowing there's a stigma there, there is shame associated with that a lot of the times, or thinking that you're not good enough or that you are a failure. But that's not the reality, because that's our judgment. That's what's in our head. The reality is you're at a point and place in life where the pause could be your silver lining. I like to think of it, right? Where it might be a time to create some white space. And that might be moments. It might not be a big, long period of time. It could be every Saturday from 2 to 3 o'clock where you spend out walking in nature, right? Like that could be a pretty powerful way to think differently, because you're out of your routine. You're out of doing the do in that task mode. And so I think the stigma is just like the first step. I think there's a inkling to say, yeah, like I burned out, and that's the first step. But know that if you're there or if that's where you are, there's so much runway to change that. It is not the end. It's almost like the beginning and a pivot to what could be different. And that's why I'm so passionate about helping people pause and helping get the word out about intentional shift in behavior, because it's possible. You don't have to stay burned out or overwhelmed any one day longer. It's about what you could do differently and get help for it too.
It's almost like living for others and living for yourself. And as you are talking, these thoughts were coming to my mind that, let's say I'm an entrepreneur and I'm running a company. I'm living for others because I'm doing something that benefits somebody. If I'm working in a corporate, I'm working in a team, in some function, I'm working for others. When I'm taking care of my family, I'm working for others. It's like, when do you work for yourself? What do you do for your own self? And for me, that becomes a balancing, the counterbalance to burnout, and saying, which is pause, focus on yourself.
I think it's a little bit of awareness of like, okay, what do I need now? But moment to moment, right? So today, I might really just need some sunshine and go outside. But tomorrow, I might need to just take like 2 hours and regroup because I'm so spent on this project I'm working on. And it is a challenge. I think a lot of us aren't led to believe it's okay to focus on ourselves, right? When I say that, what comes to mind, right? Like maybe it's, oh, that's that's selfish. I know that was something in my family that we believed. Like my mom has actually told me that. So I know I grew up thinking if I focus on myself, I'm selfish. And now I don't believe that, right? I've changed that belief, but there's all these rules and beliefs in our heads that really dictate how we spend our time. But yet we also need to know the bigger picture, right? So focusing on ourselves is important, but also, like you said, that purposeful, meaningful living beyond myself, right? Like how am I contributing in a way that feels meaningful for me? When we feel both of those things, like you said, the actual like practice of putting ourselves first and knowing there's bigger contributions I can have, and it fuels me, then we kind of hit our stride as well to feel purposeful, and burnout actually fades away because we feel the meaning that gives us that purpose, and we're focused on ourselves. And I think that's the sweet spot. I don't think it's easy to get there, but it's possible. And I think that's a vision I hold for myself and for others, because I think it's changes up how you can be in overwhelm when that happens.
So I'm going to get a bit personal now. And what does Rachel do to pause?
That's an easy question, actually. I was like, wait, we're getting personal here. What do we know? Well, for me, I think it varies and it's changed over time. And I always am checking in. So for me, like I have a morning routine. For me, I aim to do 15 minutes of meditation in the morning. I wrote a book. I wrote a Pause the Journal because I am a fan of journaling. And even for 2 minutes, I'll try to just go through an entry there. I might listen to some music. So the morning routine to me is a non-negotiable. And like today, so I row in the morning. I'm a rower, and we get up really early. So like today, I didn't do that, but I'm not beating myself up.
Now, 1 second, Rachel. You're not doing justice. You are a national rowing champion. So let's not
Okay,
diminish who
I
you are.
digress. Yes.
And that too, I think 2 times. Am I correct?
It was 6 times, but like it was enough that we did
Six.
that. Yeah, that was back in my
6 times.
heyday of rowing at the New York Athletic Club, and now I'm a masters rower, which means I have less energy and older, and all of the strikes up against me. But it's still like something that I love to do, which actually fuels me to be in the mode of receiving and that nourishment, and then like that fuels other things too. And I think that's a big part of one thing that I do to pause. Like rowing is a pause for me. It's an intentional shift in behavior, and I think things that we do that we love are a pause as well. This is so important. Like I said, a pause is an intentional shift in behavior. So a pause plan is the same thing, but a plan for you. And the way I like to think about it, and I think all of us can do this, is to think of your biggest challenge that gets in the way of sustaining yourself. Like, what is that one thing that you want to change that might help and support you to feel better, to have more well-being, to be less overwhelmed, whatever that is for you. Like, I don't know what comes to mind for you. For me, it's sleep. Like I get up early for those mornings. I don't go to bed until late sometimes. I sometimes wake up. Like there's just having 7 hours of sleep is a dream for me. So think of your biggest challenge. That's the first step. The second step in the pause plan is to have an intention. What would you want to change about it? So I already said mine, which was to get 7 hours of sleep, but for you, it might be different. And for all of us, it's going to be very different and look different. Then decide how much time you'd want to have towards that pause plan. So for me, yes, I already said 7 hours, but it might be tech-free Thursdays or tech-free Thursday nights or streaming-free Fridays, whatever. There's a lot of digital tethering, I think, at this point, right? We all kind of get strapped to our devices. So it could be having those belly breath pauses or journaling. Like it could be whatever you want, and so allocating the time. It doesn't need to be super specific. Just have a broad brushstroke of amount of time there. And then know why it matters. What do you want to get out of it? Like, why would you want to have a journaling practice or a morning routine? And don't think of like 5 things, just think of one. This is the baby steps approach. And then put it into action. Like that's the pause plan basically. So just think of the biggest challenge you've got, name what you'd want to shift out of it, give it a little bit of a time chunk area, and implement it by bedtime tonight. That's, I think, the best course for action, because if we don't do it now, chances are you are less likely to do it even in 24 hours.
Because the problem is so relevant, Rachel, I could be talking to you for the next hour and a half. It's like this, we can take case study after case study and relevancy, etc. We are running out of time. Rachel, thank you for being on the show and engaging in a conversation with me. I'm delighted to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
And Rachel's book, Pause, is available now. We want to hear from you. It is about your journey of holistic well-being. If you have any feedback for us, or if you have any questions, do write to us at livingwithsunny@roundglass.com. If you like the show, please subscribe. Thank you for joining us.